I had the choice. There's a hot tub we could install and a sauna we'd have to build, so
That
we'll
is
just get the hot tub.
Right.
Probably
Everybody's-
better
does
than
it
this
mean
climate
water or
anyway.
anything? Everybody's good?
I think we're all beveraged up. It is 3:00, so as the moderator, it is called upon me to whip us into shape and get things rolling. So this is panel A, You've Got Draft, which I feel like that's kind of like a pun or something, but it's not quite anyway. But I think we all get, this is like about rewriting, right?
Are we supposed to fix the pedal type?
Yeah, we could do that. In fact, let's rewrite the title right now. I'm open to ideas. But this is the writing panel. I assume that many of you are writers or interested in talking about the craft of writing, which is cool. We can do quick intros. I'm Jon Barr. I'm in the Department of Theater and Digital Filmmaking here. I teach screenwriting as part of the film program and also part of the creative writing minor. And then to my right is
Darynda Jones. I am a writer. Hi.
That's cool.
Okay.
I mean, whatever. Yeah, you're alum of ENMU.
Well, yeah, I've had a few classes. I actually got my degree at UNM, I'll admit.
No one wants to hear about that.
Sorry.
No, I'm just joking.
It's sign language interpreter. We didn't have it here, so. Let's see, that's it. I have several series. I have 35 books out. I've hit New York Times and USA Today and all the things. Just
Yay.
me, thank you.
I'm Arkady Martine. I have the idea of publishing 35 books is frightening to me. I hope I get there someday. I have published 3 full books, which feels like an accomplishment, honestly.
It is.
I won some awards, which is cool.
But just a couple.
Yeah. And I really, really like talking about craft, so I'm super excited.
I am too.
Yay.
I'm Walter John Williams, and I've been doing this for about 45 years as a full-time professional writer. I've written over 40 volumes of fiction. I haven't counted lately, but it averages 1 a year, so it's not like I'm a speed demon with it. But I am an obsessive rewriter, and I start every day's writing by rewriting what I wrote the day before, and sometimes tossing it completely and writing it over from scratch. So.
I have a question. Do you edit as you write?
Yeah.
I do. I do, not obsessively, but I do.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
It's interesting. I remember, I'm trying to think of who it was that was saying this, that they start each day, or maybe it was you, Walter, like the previous year. Yeah, that you start each day like rewriting what you wrote the day before.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know, for me, I have a real hard time with the inner editor. I know that like Darcy was talking about, I was finding my inner editor. I was like, I need to not find my inner editor. I need to lose my inner editor. I'm like, bring them back later after I've written. So.
I will say I've done it both ways.
Mhm.
I've written insanely fast. I wrote an entire book in 7 days. And it was ridiculous. But what I learned is that my first drafts suck. And I had to do a lot of rewriting. But I like just kind of editing a little bit as I go. And not horribly, because you're going to go back and do it again. But yeah, I just feel like instead of so I learned from so many writers, don't even worry about it. Just get the words on there. It's like they call it the vomit draft.
Yeah.
Just vomit the words on it. Well, to me, I have found with my writing is that I feel like my final drafts, when I do that, they're never quite as good if I have more time in the first draft. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be the odd person out. My first drafts are really, really, really clean. I'm probably slower than most of you. And it's not that I edit while I'm writing, it's that, well, I guess I must, but I don't have a conscious sort of process of editing during the first draft. So how many of you know about National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo? Like, I have tried to do that 4 times in my life, and each time it has screwed me up on writing everything for months afterward. because I just can't go
It
fast
messes with
if I don't know what I want to do. I'm a really sort of tight writer. Most of my editing work is to create more space in what I've written and to pull it open and make things more explainable, and less like inside my own head. So not knowing what I want to do is paralytic for me, way more than it's freeing. I think it's super freeing from people. Like the vomit draft thing, if that works for you, it sounds like it could be really fun. I fail at it every time.
Well, I will say
Yeah,
the
right.
one that I wrote in 70s, I already had an outline on it.
Fair enough.
So, but you know what? I read some of your stuff. I think you're just fine.
Yeah.
I wish I was faster. Like that's the thing.
We
That's
always
the,
We all do.
We
Yeah.
all do, don't we?
Yeah.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, the vomit draft, it's a great idea, and I try and do that, but then I just get hung up on one word,
Mm.
you know? I just put down a word and that's not quite the right word. What is the word I'm actually, and 20 minutes later, I go, oh, it's disenchantment. How do I spell that? Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Some things you can put bracket notes around and some things you really can't. Some things you
Yeah.
need the right word.
I love brackets notes. It's like,
It's-
and then a terrible thing happens.
Yes.
I do it for names and like
Names, I do too.
names, sometimes like things I know I'm gonna have to look at exactly how they work or call someone who understands a carburetor. When I know that, okay, I know, I understand this enough to make it work for the plot, but to describe why the problem happens, I'm gonna sound like an idiot. So bracket carburetor issue, bracket.
Yes, yes. Mine is insert super hot sex scene. So I write hotter than these guys, just so you know.
Oh, I try.
Oh, no, you're good.
But
Yeah, I
you're
just-
really good.
No, thank you. I just feel like, yeah, I'm gonna come back to that. Those take some time.
Yeah, and like sometimes you can write in a coffee shop and sometimes you kind of
Yeah,
can't.
right,
Mhm.
yeah, that's not a good thing to do.
But it's interesting because it makes me think that like the rewriting part of whatever your rewriting process is, it's informed by your writing process, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
like, I think the four of us are outliners, right? Or like planners. I know there's like the planner versus pantser debate.
Yeah,
I
here's
don't believe in it.
Yeah.
You know, and Jackie Kennedy's that way too.
Yeah.
She's like, nope, I don't believe in that. And I think that there's such a spectrum,
Mhm.
you know, of different, and I do lean toward the plotting part. I'm super big, but I don't always stick with it.
Yeah,
As detailed as my outlines are, I still, as you're writing, things pop into your head that you never would have thought of when you're outlining. They just don't, so.
and I do outline, but I don't outline the whole book. I usually outline like 4 or 5 scenes ahead of where I am.
Okay.
Which is kind of the shape of a chapter if I'm writing a novel. It's also the length of a short story, and I started out as a short story writer, and I still think in like 5,000 word chunks, like arc wise, like pacing wise. So that's about it feels like having headlights when you're driving at night. Like you can see clearly what's ahead of you in the field of vision that your lights give you. And you know probably some big things that will occur on your journey.
Schenectady, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like you might end up there or possibly like, I don't know, flat tires, giant semi trucks,
Mhm.
etc.
Chupacabras.
Yeah. But if I try to go past like that edge of the light, I will paralyze, like I'll lock up things that I don't want to lock up yet. I think about a lot of my writing process as like building a super saturated solution, like you put a lot of stuff in and it looks like a kind of soupy mess. And then there's this moment where it all goes into crystalline structure and you couldn't have had that structure had you not dumped all those things in your water. But I can't make it happen before it happens. My editing process though, to talk about like editing, which I think we're supposed to be talking about, is far more, I guess, technical and iterative, because a lot of it is how do I take what I made, which is really, really tightly bound together, and make it so the reader can come with me on this journey. And it's not just me and the inside of my head. And that can be like, I've done the index card trick where you write down what happens at every scene in your book. I've done the let's map everybody's motivations trick, which is why did the politics turn out this way? Did I actually layer in what these people were thinking early enough for it to make sense when they did whatever they did? I end up making a lot of like terrible notebooks at the editing time.
Yeah. I had one thing where I had a male protagonist and he was 18. And he's behaving very much like an 18-year-old male. But I had first readers who had never been 18-year-old males. And they were looking at it, well, you don't understand. Oh, okay, I understand them now. I will change to the first person, and I did. And that solved the problem. Have the character himself tell you why he's behaving the way he is and what he's trying to accomplish.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, well, it meant rewriting 120
It's a
pages.
lot of
Yeah.
And then you always miss some, like it's too high, you'll have he or whatever.
Yeah.
Always.
I feel like when you change point of view, you are actually like changing something really deep about the book that's a hard rewrite. I admire that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I was able to get away with it by having that book was the Quillifer series, which is 3 books so far, and will be 3 more if I ever get a chance to write them. But it's told in first person in the form of reminiscence.
Mhm.
Each reminiscence is told to a different woman
Mhm.
in his life,
Mhm.
and shortly after the events of the novel. So it's not a big retrospective thing. It's not when he's 60 years old and he's looking back on being 18. He's 19 and he's looking back on being 18 and he's telling you what's happened to him, and that seems to work.
One of the things I love about first person is that first person narrators are fundamentally unreliable because they're always talking to somebody, even if
Yeah.
they're just talking to the audience or to themselves.
Yeah.
And therefore they are choosing what they want the story to sound like.
And in fact, I explored that in one of the books. I had him lying throughout the whole book.
Nice.
Nice.
Until on the last chapter, you found out, oh, I'm sorry. Here's what I was really doing. Because the woman that he was narrating his story to was someone that he was fooling the whole time, for good reason, as it turns out.
I think one of the challenges of, well, like if you're doing next day rewriting or, you have that freshness, but then you lack distance. So I'm curious, like, do you feel like there's a benefit to like put it away and come back to it and sort of see it with fresh eyes? Yeah.
Always. If I had time to do that more often, I would absolutely, but I slide in right there when my deadline.
Yeah. Deadlines don't do it, right?
Yeah.
I do that especially with short fiction because very rarely, sometimes you have to write short fiction on deadline, like if you promised a story to an anthology, but most of the time, at least for me, I'm still writing short fiction for submission,
Mhm.
same as anybody. And then you want to put it away for a little bit. At least I can get too close to it. I can't see where the issues are because I have fixed them already inside my head. So no, I changed it enough. It's fine. This is also where I feel like it's really valuable to have a very trusted first reader or first readers who can tell you not like necessarily the super macro stuff that your editor or your agent might do, but can tell you if you succeeded in doing what you're telling them you wanted the scene to do. Just like, did I convince you of this? Was it scary? Was it hot? That kind of thing.
Was it scary hot?
Yeah, sometimes.
Walter, they announced at lunch today that you're the head of the House Toolbox, which I thought you were
I was the founder.
the founder of.
Yeah, I've retired from it.
That's what I
Yeah,
thought.
Yeah. Connie read, so.
So kind of right, yeah. But so I'm curious, like in the House Toolbox, have you taught like a rewriting process or tips for rewriting?
Not as such, no. I mean, we tried to teach what people needed to learn. which is different each time.
Mhm.
So some of our standard talks are standard workshop to workshop. Some of them we will bend in certain directions to address certain issues that have come up. But for the most part, the people that we were dealing with, their problem is getting it down the first time.
Mhm. Like procrastination or?
It's just inexperience.
Mhm.
They really haven't worked out how to tell the story they want to tell.
Yeah.
And so we tend to address that more than anything else.
I do think there's a peril for new writers in thinking about rewriting too early or trying to build a rewriting practice when you should be building a writing practice first.
Mhm.
And I guess I think that for some people, and I think you might be one of them,
Yeah.
the rewriting practice of doing some each day is natural and organic.
Mhm.
And
it builds a rhythm.
And it builds a rhythm.
Yeah.
And the more you are talking about it, the more I think, well, I sort of do that, kind of. Because I'll read the scene before the scene I intend to write. And I will fix things if they aren't right. But it's funny because I've never thought of that as a rewriting practice. I think of it as getting back into tone.
Yeah.
But I have run into, especially amongst newer writers especially people who are working on something long for the first time, who get really stuck in I have to have this part perfect before I move on. And the intense 15th time rewrite of the first chapter. You're not going to make it any better at that point. It's just not going to go. You should either write the second chapter or a different book at that point.
Yeah.
And also, if it's novel length, it's not going to be perfect. It'll never be perfect.
Never will.
Yeah, I can make a
Novel
short story
is-
perfect.
A novel is a collection of words of at least 40,000 and flawed.
Yeah.
Who said that first? I think that's Patrick Gilson Hayden. It sounds like it.
Could be right.
I agree. And there's just, if you haven't sold and you're not under a contract yet, just know that you are in the freest part of your life. You will never have that freedom again. Once you sell and you're under contract and you have to put out so many books per year, and it's just that freedom's gone. And you get be sure that whatever you do sell, it's not that this can't change, it can always change. But whatever you do sell, be sure that it's something that you can see yourself writing in that genre for the rest of your life. I'm not saying you can't change it.
Sometimes you need a new name.
Get a new pseudonym, whatever. But I mean, I was writing, it was so funny because when I wrote the Charlie Davidson series, I thought it was urban fantasy, which it technically is. But my agent refused to let them call it urban fantasy. She said, no, it's mystery. It's paranormal mystery. Now, I did not know that until I wrote the third book. And I wrote the whole book and I turned it in, and my editor, she says, can I call you? And I'm like, this has never happened. This is not good. And she's like, Darynda, I love the book, but we're going along and there's the bad guy and we keep going. He's still the bad guy. We get to the end, he's the bad guy. I'm like, well, yeah, he was the bad guy. Like, what? The whole time. And she's like, Darynda, you write mystery. He can't be the bad guy. I'm like, I write mystery? So nobody had told me I wrote mystery. I had no clue. I mean, I knew that there was a mystery, but I didn't know that I wrote mystery. I thought, to me, I'm like, I'm not smart enough to write mystery. Well, apparently I do. And they shelved it under mystery. So then later, my agent wanted me to go straight mystery with no paranormal elements because I have paranormal in the first series. And I was like, okay. I was like, I don't think I can do it. She's like, Darynda, you already do it. You just can't have, demons and the son of Satan showing up, okay? So it's very interesting. But I would say the one thing that I can't seem to get away from is the comedy. My readers want that comedy. And when I first started writing, I didn't know that I wrote comedy. But everybody kept telling me that, oh, this book's so funny. I'm like, in a bad way? What? And so I had to go back and I thought, you know what? That was the first manuscript I wrote. It's and I thought I'm going to capitalize on this. I'm going to purposely try to write comedy. Well, then it was horrible. But I did read books on writing comedy, and so I got better at it.
Need to do some work so you get it next time. But you don't always have to do everything an edit letter says.
I call that picking your battles.
Yes.
There's also in screenwriting, it's called studio notes or notes, and and one of the things that they talk about is figuring out the note behind the note. So
Yes.
that, and I feel like that's kind of what you're saying, where it's like, oh, this doesn't work, but it's not because of that thing, it's because this other thing that I didn't set up well enough. And if I bolster that, then this will work.
Yes.
And so do you have the same with novels and short stories? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I've had a couple books that were saved by editing,
Oh, yeah.
by the copy editor, not my actual editor.
Oh, yes.
Because there are days in which I'm just a crap writer, and I wish I knew those days ahead of time, and I wouldn't try and write on those days. But I can, if it's a crap writer day, my writing is crap, and I sort of know it, and I'm having a hard time with it, but I've already started, so it's kind of stupid to stop now. And then the next day, I throw it out or drastically rewrite it or something. But apparently there are years in which I am a crap writer. And somebody has to come through and say, was this what you intended to say? And wouldn't that be better phrased this way?
Mhm.
And yeah, okay. I'm a crap writer, sorry.
A copy
But
editor.
at least two books a copy editor has saved.
A copy editor found an instance where I had, and I kept it because I thought it was funny, but I lampshaded it. An instance where I had put the same piece of furniture in 3 different rooms in a person's house. And it was mostly like I had written and rewritten that chapter several times. And I just had a turquoise couch in all of the rooms. And since the character who owned the flat with the turquoise couch in it was somewhat shady to begin with, I ended up just having there be a turquoise couch in every room, and the protagonists think about how they might have all fallen off the back of the truck. But I did not know they were there until copy editing at all, and that's not the my wife who's in the other room and doing the other panel right now. I think she's told this story in public, so I can tell it too. In her first novel, it took till page proofs, which is the stage after copy editing, where it's all done in layout, for someone to catch that a character who had been in a conversation then re-enters the room to continue the conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, done that.
Yeah.
I've done that.
Yeah.
I know one case of a copy editor who said, on page 51, the character steeples his fingertips. On page 19, the character has lost his left hand. Is this a contradiction?
Yes, in fact, well done.
That's funny. So mine that a copy editor caught, and it could have actually been a proofreader or after the copy edits. I think it was because it was about to go to press, and all of a sudden they write me this emergency letter, and so I had one of my characters. My character could see dead people, okay, and she would help solve their mysteries, but also they would just all over the world, they would pass through her and she could see their lives. And I had this one, and he was a Sherpa, in Nepal, yes. And so I thought a Sherpa was a job. They're the people who take the people up Mount Everest. They're leaders or whatever they are, guides, I guess. And somebody came back and they said, no, it's a culture. They're a group of people. I was like, what?
That's their ethnicity.
Yeah, sure.
Their
An ethnic group,
ethnicity.
yeah.
I did not even know that. And I did so much research, and I felt so bad. He's like, you idiot. So
The Sherpas left Tibet at the Chinese invasion.
Oh,
And so
okay.
they were at loose ends in Nepal with nothing to do, no jobs, no land. And it was what's his name? The first guy up Everest.
Tenzing
Tenzing.
Thank you.
No, not Tenzing Norgay, the other one. Edmund Hillary,
Yes.
who said we can
Of
employ
the
these
Hillary
people,
step.
on mountainsides. And
Wow.
And then
Yeah.
it became part of
Yeah.
like a thing that culture does a lot,
Right.
Tenzing Norgay
Especially
admitted
by-
Hillary was first at some point. He was on the record when he said it, so.
So yes, they're good people to have in your life.
Oh, yeah.
Well, because then if the copy editors don't catch it and it's not caught like in the proofs, then your fans will tell you, right?
Yeah.
Yes, they will, and that's
Yeah,
the nightmare. I could just imagine all these horrible messages and emails of people angry with me and screaming at.
yeah, you should try and get a copy editor who knows about guns.
Yeah, and
That's one thing
horses.
that's very useful, yeah, right.
If you plan to include guns or horses, you need someone in your life somewhere
Uh-huh.
who knows a lot about guns and or horses or
Yeah.
both to look at your manuscript because you will screw up. And there are a lot of people who know about guns and a lot of people who know about horses, and they all care a lot about those things. And they would like to tell you about them.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those cases where my research betrayed me.
Mm.
Because I'd never been on a big game hunt. And I did lots of research on big game hunts and what kind of big game weapons you would use to bring down your big game. It was all wrong. And so I got rather long letter, and then I wrote back and I said, thank you very much, but I found this here and I found this here and I found it. And I said, no, that's a different kind of big game hunting. The kind that you're describing is this other thing.
Yep.
And they were hunting wild boar and using Nitro Express cartridges, which would have just blown the boar into small
I guess
pieces.
it depends on what you wanted to accomplish.
Right,
Yeah.
what is your goal?
Is it to remove the wild boar or is it to eat some of it later?
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear what questions our audience may have. Yes.
Actually, it was, I guess not necessarily a question, but it was a comment. So when you were talking about, like the next day rewriting and how there was that freshness, but without the distance, the conversation about that reminded me of something that I heard a few weeks ago at Gary Com when I was talking to Ed Greenwood. Father of Forgotten, I don't know if anyone's familiar with that setting, but Dungeons and Dragons setting. But he was like, he basically said, if people judge themselves by their past writing and that only, they will never be happy with their writing because they're not gonna be happy with their past works.
There's a point where that's true for me, but so far it's lagged about 10 to 15 years behind.
Mhm.
So there's still a pretty decent window where I can read my own stuff and think, okay, I did a decent job.
Right.
But there's definitely, I mean, even things that were professionally published at the very beginning of my career, which is like 12-ish years ago now. Like I could, yeah, that's juvenile. I can do that better. And it's usually just technical. Like there's a thing I believe about like a person's progression through being a writer and then being a published writer, is that there's a point at which all of your ideas are decent enough to be published, but you may not have the skill yet to execute those ideas,
Right.
or you may not have the skill that you will someday have, even if you have successfully executed the idea. And when I look back at what I was publishing like in 2012, it's like, yeah, this is a good idea and this is a good story, but your technical skill is only barely up to par, lady.
Yeah, there are a couple books earlier in my career that I had thought were failures. And I wrote the hell out of them, but I just couldn't satisfy myself with them. And then 30 years later, I was turning them into ebooks and I reread them and I'm going, holy hell, I hit a home run with this book. What was I thinking? And I was working so hard on it and driving myself so crazy that I couldn't see what I was accomplishing.
Right.
And that's the distance thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of it is just the whole,
Uh-huh.
I think if you just focus only on like what you could have done better, and only that, then yeah, you just making yourself unhappy if you don't look at what you've done right too.
Yeah.
There's also if you do end up publishing, these things are just out there and you cannot redo them really. not in a way that
Unless you're
is,
George Lucas.
even then, the attempt creates
Yeah.
certain
Oh,
resonances that,
definitely.
yeah. But, so I think it's probably a good idea to have a lot of compassion for the person you were when you wrote the story, if you're planning on putting things in the public eye.
I agree, that's a good thing to say, because we're so hard on ourselves as writers, we really are. You know, I'll read stuff, oh, sorry.
No, please.
I was gonna say, I'll read stuff that I hadn't read in, 15 years or whatever. And I'm usually, it's the opposite, I'm usually surprised at how well I did, because I thought it just was horrible. My first book, like I said, when I said I decided to lean into the comedy, I thought First Grade was just ridiculous. I tried too hard, with the comedy. But then I went back and I'm like, well, I mean, this could have been done better, but it's not bad. Like, I wrote that line. Like, did you see that line? That was a good line.
We really should, and I mean this not just for people who make this their career, but anyone who does creative work, is to let yourself be proud of the good bits, because probably you're gonna get some, and it's pretty cool that you made that with your brain.
Yeah.
Now, another thing about redrafting is if particularly, when you think you're done and you want to go through and do a final polish, or just make sure the continuity works, right? It can be a kind of rediscovery, because there's bound to be stuff in there that you forgot. And for instance, I noticed that I tend to give the same speech to several characters during the course of the book, because I've forgotten I gave it to someone else earlier. And so then I get a choice of like 3 or 4 scenes in which that information is revealed, and I go, well, which is the best? This is the best, but it needs to be moved here. Well, okay.
I tend to think I have done things that I haven't done,
Yeah.
which is a delightful and horrific experience. Because I will have said, no, I definitely set this up in chapter 3. And I will read chapter 3 expecting to see myself having set this up.
Mhm.
And I will discover that, no, I did not. It's not there. It's not there at all. I've back formed memory. And then I have to put it back in. But I've also had that experience of I've done a version of conveying this information several times.
Yeah.
And which one is the one that's going to most advance the story, is going to have the most impact.
And occasionally you do need to remind the reader of
Yes.
something.
Right.
That's one of my other laws. You do sort of have to say it 3 times, because the first time most people will miss it, and the second time only some of them will get it. And
The problem is the people who you lose between time 2 and 3.
yeah. But also, you can discover themes that you didn't intend. Well, this is a bad example, but say, you're rereading, and early on, your character gets a bouquet of flowers delivered, and is very happy because it's from somebody who means a lot. And then towards the end, there's some flowers in the scene, and she's really busy, and she's got to save the world, and so she, just throws the vase across the room and stuff. And I realized, okay, well, this could be emblematic of this relationship that she's had, and there should be a 3rd scene in the middle.
Yes.
That somehow balances all this out. And then suddenly you've got a flower theme running, and you get, a flower theme is really obvious, but on the other hand, you can work on that for quite a bit. You can have flowers appear in every other scene, commenting on something, right?
I do feel like editing is a really good time to do thematic work and do tonal work to make sure that your book sounds like you meant the same deep ideas the whole way through, because at least in my experience when I've been writing them, sometimes I did not mean the same thing the whole way through. I discovered what I wanted the book to be about somewhere halfway, and then you need to sort of shift all of those tonal markers. If this character is upset, do they think about their relationship to their parent? If I'm doing something about legacy in this book, or when they get upset, do they deliberately think about how they're alone?
Oh.
How do you want to balance that out?
I had one book where it was about a couple of star-crossed lovers, and they spent almost the entire book apart. And so I kind of wanted to remind the reader that there was, an important relationship kind of left hanging here. But they couldn't interact with one another for all sorts of good reasons. But I developed some, I noticed, this comes from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, by the way. I noticed that when Buffy's romantic life is improving, her friends' romantic lives are in the toilet. And vice versa, that her friends start having successful relationships. Buffy's relationship goes into the toilet. And so it's these stories are always complementing each other and talking to each other throughout the entire series. And so I thought, okay, well, we need some more lovers in this book. And so I didn't create them, they've been there all along, but I started having interactions between some of the minor characters. And it prefigured all of the possible outcomes for the protagonists. There was one couple lived happily ever after. Another couple ended up in a violent, horrible relationship, and one of them got killed. And the other one had just difficulties of one sort or another that proved impossible to overcome. And so I'm sort of giving a little smorgasbord of what could happen in this book by the end. By way of showing the reader how to that they should be thinking about this stuff.
And those are the things that kind of will emerge in rewrites, right?
Yeah, I feel like, especially thematic work, you need a whole object, or at least a big chunk of an object to work on, to make changes to. Otherwise, you're not actually rewriting, you are writing for the first time. But for me, like, big plot stuff happens mostly in first draft. But thematic work, explanatory work, exposition, clarification is all major second draft work.
I agree.
Regina.
So my question is coming as a special collections librarian who works with special collections library researchers and finding that excitement in the development of a story and the scribbles on the draft and the notes, and this is a different handwriting, someone wrote suggestions or question marks, and seeing how the work has changed. So now we're in digital, we have our word processors that are electronic. How do you each as authors track or don't track any changes in your work?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Most of them aren't really very exciting or important.
Yeah.
But the book I am on now, I'm currently on version 4.0. I mean, there are 3 whole books before this one, and they all are trying to tell the same story. And so that will be preserved in an electronic file somewhere, I assume. I don't know that maybe I will print them out, who knows?
So I'm a historian by training, which means I care enormously about archives. And I also don't trust digital archives at all. I don't keep a lot of commented drafts, but I do keep original and changed separately, and with dates. And for things that are never going to in any other way appear in a physical piece of media that I think are important for some reason.
Future researchers, thank you.
Yeah, I print them. I haven't yet gone as nuts as to print on archival paper, but that may come at a point in my life. I am a relatively techno-savvy person who is also a complete Luddite, and I just do not trust that anything that is not physical media will survive and be readable for more than approximately a 20 to 25 year period. So if you care about it, you should make a physical copy that can be put into a nice asset-free box.
Nice. I've never even considered that. I will say, as I'm writing every day, I create a new draft and date the draft.
Oh, yeah.
And that way, and it's only for when, it's not for archiving or anything, it's just like, okay, if I mess up and delete this scene, and then later I'm like, oh, I really liked that scene, I can go right back and go find that scene and put it back. So that's the only, I have a new draft every day, so. And it's surprising how some books I'll have, 15 days, and then others will have, 78, and it just depends on the book and how far I get each day, and it's interesting, but that's what I do. But my thinking, I'm like, oh, it's in the cloud, it'll be fine forever and ever.
Fine for a little while.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm having difficulty reading my own files from 25 years ago, but
There are things that I wish I had saved from, and it's all like juvenilia, like stories I wrote with people in a fandom I was in like 25 years ago that I just do not have anymore, and nobody does, and they are not findable because the internet has eaten them.
Yes.
And I miss them.
Yeah.
I liked those characters and those people, and I'd love to reread them just for me. So I've gotten weird about archives. I also do a lot of, I guess, ephemera surrounding books. Like for the Tixkalon books, I have the list of all the names I've used, because I discovered in the middle of writing the second Tixkalon book that I really like the sound pattern that comes with words that begin with C and the number 2. And I had like 8 people who had that pattern, and that was really not in any way not confusing. So now I have to keep track, and also when you do a completely created world, you invent a lot of things and you give them names, and then you've forgotten which legion is which legion, and if you gave one of them a flag or something. So I have, and most of this isn't printed, and probably, if I'm serious about what I'm saying, should be. I have a lot of files that are sort of related to the book that are stuck in a file folder. And I sometimes do physical things like the index cards, which I might keep, but sometimes I don't, because they just end up getting kind of tatty by the end.
yeah, I write a lot on legal pads,
Mm-hmm.
but I find that I use a certain code that's peculiar to me, and so I don't know how comprehensible it would be to anyone else.
Sure, they'd be like, what is he on?
Yeah.
I mean, there's also.
I
like the
write to myself, well, the
notebooks, so-
evil Duke of Evil defeats the Angel of Light, right?
All right.
And that's because I haven't bothered to give these characters names yet,
Right.
So there's the evil Duke of, well, you have to figure out who that is, if you're an archivist, I guess.
That sounds like a fun opportunity for future archivists, right?
Sounds like a great graduate student project.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Take good.
And I use different colored pens for different characters and interactions, and I don't do this for, I mean, some books are just so clean in my head, I don't need to write notes at all. But some of them, when I'm working them out, I end up with quite detailed outlines and such.
I'm glad you said that. I do that too.
Yeah.
Some I've got the whole story and it's in my head. I don't even need to.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Let's see.
So I wrote a book when I was 19. It's not been published yet. And well, I'm trying to re-edit it as of right now. So the first half of the book, I didn't even have a voice yet.
Yeah.
I just thought, I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna start writing.
Mhm.
And then I started kind of figuring out a voice at the second half of the novel. And first off, I don't really know how to edit for voice, but now I'm on a completely different, like, creative tangent than I was when I was 19. So when I'm coming back to this book, how should I edit this? Should I try to be editing it to be within the spirit of the time that I wrote it, or should I try to take in like the new creative, I guess, high that I'm on right now?
Yeah. Either answer is correct. If I were you, I would use every tool I have.
Okay.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
100%.
Especially because you're new.
Yeah.
If you've written one book,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool, by the way, like congratulations for finishing a book. The way you're describing it, with the first half being kind of less inhabited, I guess, there's a lot of opportunity there to make a choice about what you want the whole book to sound like. Because while you may have found a voice in the second half, that sounds like it's not the voice you're interested in right now. There's also the option of editing that book later and doing the thing you're interested in right now, and then coming back to it when you can look at it and not see all of the ways that it isn't the thing you're interested in. You have all the time in the world, basically, to do it. And also, like, there's a certain value in thinking about why you made the choices you did when you first wrote it. And the value may be in its totality. I was trying to do this and I just did it. And the choice you make about what you want to do with that, whether it's scrap it, rewrite it for a particular voice, start at the second half of the book where it starts sounding like something you're interested in. There's a million things you could do with it. But looking at why you did what you did, when you did it, might tell you what will feel like it's what you were thinking then is connected to where you are now.
And I'm gonna just throw this in, since we're talking about voice. To me, your voice is your biggest commodity, because nobody can replicate your voice. It's yours. I remember when I first started writing toward publication seriously, everybody kept saying, you know, what is an editor and agent looking for? Are they looking for a fresh voice? I'm like, what do you even mean? What does that even mean? And then I found, I wrote Charlie Davidson, and everybody's like, oh, your voice is so fresh. I'm like, why? Why is it fresh? What do you mean? I was just so confused. But you know what? It just was a different voice that wasn't out there, and it's yours.
It's the thing that sounds like you.
Yeah.
Or sounds like what you wanted to do, because I think you can write in multiple voices over a career simultaneously. Like there's voice in the sense of what you, the author, are interested in, and then there's voices in what does this book sound like, and different books sound different. But there's some deep continuity there because you, the author, are making all of those different things happen. But we were talking earlier about like looking back at your earlier work. When I look back at some of my publishable but not yet great stuff, I am writing pastiche. I have borrowed other people's voice and executed a story that sounds like things I like, which is honestly a very good way to learn how to write. But there's a point at which you have to kind of flip over into, what if I wasn't imitating someone, but using these tools for myself instead? And I think that's the point where people start telling you, wow, you have such a distinctive, fresh voice.
Right,
And you're like, I just wanted to tell this story this way. But it's the I there. I wanted to do this.
So just to tack on to that question, if I may. So with that first half, well, when it comes to editing for voice, should you do that line by line, or are there just some times where you just have to like cut a chapter out because that's just not the right voice? Okay.
I
Yeah.
think you could
Or-
cut it or just rewrite it.
You could completely rewrite
Right.
that first part from
Yeah.
scratch
You write
in
down
the
the main
voice that you have now
stuff.
developed. I
Okay,
mean,
this
it's,
happens and that happens and that happens, and he says, but then just go rewrite it.
yeah.
In your voice, because your voice develops over time. And yeah.
And sometimes other writers' voices will really screw you over. I
Oh,
mean,
yes.
I remember I was in college and I had a course in which I read an awful lot of Hemingway short stories. And it wrecked my writing for the next year. Because I was writing stories when we went fishing and it.
I mean, like, only Hemingway can pull that off. I have the same problem, but so I love Stephen King novels. Like, they are what I read for pleasure a great deal of the time. But if I am actively working on deadline on something of mine, I cannot read any Stephen King. That is a super catchy voice. I can imitate it, but it's not what I mean to sound like. And it's like catching an accent when you talk to someone too much who has a very strong accent that isn't yours. And some people, I am really prone to doing that. So I do that with writing too. But if I were your creative writing professor, I would tell you to do what Jon just described, which is take each scene of the part of your book you feel doesn't have much voice. Write down to yourself like a sentence of this scene accomplishes whatever. And without looking at the previous version at all, in a completely new document, probably somewhere you've never been, try again.
And you might even just try it with a few scenes and just
Yeah.
see how it comes out.
I mean,
See
like,
if it works.
if it works for you, you can
Yeah.
do the whole book that way. If it doesn't work for you, you'll learn something.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
It's interesting, you know, in like with screenwriting, there's a suggestion that's like you actually fantasy cast your film. So it's like there's a picture of Tom Hanks, and like when I'm typing the lines, like imagine Tom Hanks saying the lines. And it just made me think, like, wouldn't it be interesting to fantasy cast your narrator so that you're like, this is the voice, this is
Some
who's,
people do that.
yeah.
I
All
do
of mine
not.
would be James Earl Jones.
James Earl Jones.
The people I make up don't exist in
Yeah.
the world. It's frustrating. I like, because, again, like I hinted earlier, I came from fandom, so like I'm used to doing and this is how the person looks and moves when they say the thing that I am making them say. But when I write original fiction, I have never really found good like actors or actress matches to the people who exist in my head. I know what they look like, I know what they sound like, but yeah. I always feel slightly bad when I get that question because it would be fun to have good answers
Yeah.
for it.
Other questions?
Yeah. So, like, how consciously are you focused on pacing during the editing process? And like, what are you looking for to manage good pacing while editing?
It's the primary thing I'm editing for me. I write too dense. There's no breathing space at all. Things happen too fast. The characters don't ever stop. The reader doesn't get much of a chance to breathe. Most of my initial work in doing a second draft is I underwrite, so I'm adding somewhere between 10,000 and 40,000 more words to the book. So where on earth do they go? That's always how I feel at the beginning of it, is I made this perfect object and all of its little joints are soldered together. And I have to break them all open and push new things inside. So pacing is super important to me in editing. And pacing also is something that I feel like you can learn a little bit by feel. Like you want the story to feel fast sometimes and to feel slow at other times. Sometimes you want to like give your audience the chance to luxuriate in something, or think that they're going to be able to and then have that taken away from them. And I guess like I try to manage how I think about pacing by thinking about what I want my reader to feel like at a moment in this, like, how do I make this experiential for them?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry. Go.
I have this is sort of a rule that I feel like following and might, or I don't, but I want to have like a big reveal or a big raising of the stakes every, say, 20,000 words.
Okay.
Or sooner, you know, if it's a very fast-paced book, but every 20,000 years I want to have the reader sit up and say, wait a minute, something just happened, what was that? And then start thinking about it. And it can be an action scene, it can be discovery of a heretofore hidden relationship between the characters, it can be anything like that. Depends on the kind of book you want to write, but every so often, something big has to happen.
I kind of do that too. I'm just kind of like, okay, you know, they've been talking a lot, they're doing this, they're trying to find this clue, something needs to happen. And I'll just kind of, and I do that actually a lot in my outline. I figure out, okay, this seems to happen, but we need something big here, something big here. Oh, we need this big twist here. But I will say that, not so much anymore, but several novels, when I would finish my first draft, like it was 95% dialogue. We didn't know where these people were. We didn't know like what the environment looked like. So I would go in and I'd slow some stuff down and then I'd speed it up here and slow some stuff. So I do think of pacing. I just don't think of it in those terms.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting though. I just actually bought a workbook a friend of mine put out and on pacing. So I'll know more next time.
Sometimes it's useful to think about the traditional like story structures that you learn about, like the 5-act structure or the Freytag pyramid or many of like what's the thing where they wander around to the countryside, the pastoral.
Yes.
I find them useful to have as tools to get yourself unstuck. Like, why is the pacing not working? Maybe it's because I haven't moved something or escalated the way you were talking about. Like the one I use all the time, and I don't really write to 5-act structure at all, but the one I do use is you're thinking about a book that's 100,000 words long. At around between 15 and 20,000 words, you have got to make everything worse. Like that's about as much time as you have for setup. You can introduce your characters, introduce your world, introduce your basic problem. Somewhere right around that Act 1, Act 2 switch, something has to go really wrong. That isn't the inciting incident of the book. Like it's not the reason the book is happening, but it's the reason the rest of the book happens the way it does. Like, and I have several notebooks where I've written, make everything worse at the top of a page and then listed the ways I could do that.
Yes, and my note is torture your characters.
Oh, yeah.
Just, we fall in love with our characters and we don't want anything bad to happen to them, but you know what, that's a boring book. So, yeah,
We
torture
fall
your
in love with our
characters.
characters, then we want really bad things to happen.
That's
They're
true.
pretty.
Weird, it's kind of weird, what is that masochist or sadist or something? I don't know.
But hopefully they grow and learn and
They
become
do.
better.
Sometimes. Well,
Sometimes.
Really true.
I don't know if I write good enough people for them to really grow and learn all the time.
We're actually at time. Dave, can we defer your question to another moment? All right, well, thank you. Please join me in thanking our guest authors. And there's 2 more sessions, 4:10 and 5:20, I imagine. So stick around. And there's academic panels where Kelsey will be presenting her paper.
I did not be on channels that go this.
I know.